We'll just give a few minutes for people to enter. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to the Gerontological Society of America's inaugural Career Conversations. This one is entitled Mentorship, Developing Reciprocal and Productive Relationships. I'm Patty Slatum. I'm a visiting scholar with the GSA, and I'm faculty with the Virginia Center on Aging at Virginia Commonwealth University. Before we begin today's program, I would like to provide a few logistical considerations. First of all, please keep your audio on mute during the event and submit your questions for the panelists through the Zoom chat. We invite you to view the event in the Zoom speaker view so that you can see our speakers and panelists who are talking as well. And the career conversation is being recorded and will be available after the event. And I am joined today by GSA workgroup members Tanya Roberts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Tiffany Washington from the University of Georgia, who will serve as the co-moderators for the career conversation. In addition, Olivia Clay from the University of Alabama at Birmingham and Matthew Smith from Texas A&M are part of the work group that planned this session. Let me advance my slides. So to open today's career conversation, I would like to introduce our panelists. We are delighted to have a distinguished group of GSA members with us to share their perspectives on mentorship in gerontology. First, we welcome Dr. Khaleesha Bonds-Johnson, a T32 National Institute of Nursing Research postdoctoral fellow at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Her current research builds upon her doctoral work in caregiving experiences of African-American dementia dyads and is focused on the decision-making processes regarding formal care for African-American persons living with dementia and their families. Dr. Bonds-Johnson has experiences both positive and negative related to mentoring during her training at several institutions that shape how she wants to be a mentor. Dr. Bonds-Johnson serves as Vice Chair of ESPO for the GSA. Next, we welcome Dr. Darina Petrovsky, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing, funded by a Ruth L. Kirchenstein National Research Service Award. She has a unique background in music and nursing science, and her research focuses on improving the lives of older adults living with cognitive impairment using music-based approaches. She has experiences as a mentee during her doctoral program and 2 postdoctoral fellowships, and is taking on roles as a mentor herself for undergraduate and pre-doctoral students. And next, we welcome Dr. Marilyn Gallucci, Professor and Director of Geriatrics Education and Research at New England University. Dr. Gallucci is founding director of the UXL Fitness and Wellness Program at the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine, and she's a fellow of 4 national associations, including GSA, and recently completed her term on GSA Board of Directors. She's been recognized for mentorship as a recipient of the Augie Hiram J. Friedsam Mentorship Award and has a fruitful history in mentorship, both academically and personally, and a passion for finding creative ways to open doors of opportunity. And finally, we welcome Dr. Roland Thorpe, professor in the Department of Health, Behavior and Society, and founding director of the Program of Men's Health Research in the Hopkins Center for Health Disparity Solutions, and co-director of the Johns Hopkins Alzheimer's Disease Resource Center for Minority Aging Research. Dr. Thorpe is a social epidemiologist and gerontologist studying how race, socioeconomic status, and segregation influence health and well-being of African Americans. He participates in several training programs designed to develop underrepresented minorities at different career stages. And he was most recently recognized by GSA and the Minority Issues in Gerontology Advisory Panel Mentorship Award. We look forward today to an engaging and enlightening conversation. And this is the first of a series that we hope to engage with you all in to have productive conversation around career development. And I'll turn it over to Tanya and Tiffany. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Welcome to all of our panelists and welcome to all of you who are joining us today. It's great to be here with you all. I apologize, I have no video, rural internet issues. So I'm going to get us started with the first question for our panel today. And I think maybe we can take some turns to go around the group with everyone offering their experiences with this question. So to get us started, I'm wondering if we could start broadly with a conversation about what makes for an effective mentor and what makes a good mentor-mentee relationship. So I'm wondering, maybe Marilyn, would you like to get us started with that first question?
I would love to. Thank you, Tanya. I really believe that one of the most important aspects of an effective mentor-mentee relationship is open communication. And that includes transparency, negotiation, follow-up, and I also want to add in respect. That it's incredibly important that when you work with someone and they work with you, that there is a mutual respect for the skills that you both have and bring into that relationship.
Thank you for that, Marilyn. I'm wondering if we could have maybe from the ESPO perspective then, if Khaleesha, maybe you would like to share.
Sure. I agree with everything that Marilyn said. And I guess I would just add that I think as a mentee, from the mentee perspective, it's important to sort of know that one mentor can't do it all. And that you also need to know what you're wanting to glean or gain from that mentor-mentee relationship. Personally, I have multiple mentors that do, that provide, advice in my life when it comes to different areas. And so I think understanding that one mentor, again, I don't think can do it all.
Great, thank you. Roland, would you like to share?
Certainly, thank you. So what I agree with all the comments that have been shared to this point. The one thing that I think that is extremely important in a mentee mentor relationship is that there has to be stated expectations, and those expectations should be managed throughout the process. And then oftentimes those expectations may change and evolve over time because the mentoring relationship itself may mature over time. And also another thing that you have to understand is some mentors have a finite shelf life and others have lives longer than that. For whatever reason that shelf life may be, it may be that you just didn't get along, or maybe that you had that person to mentor you for just one specific thing and you accomplished that and you've moved on. So going back to what Khaleesha said, it's important to have, several mentors, and I suggest that those, particularly in academia, you have some in your department, outside of your department, outside of your university, because different aspects of the of mentoring can help you gain insights on some of the things that we may take for granted on a day-to-day basis. But I think the biggest thing is to manage those expectations over time.
Very good. Darina, is there anything that you would like to add in terms of what makes an effective mentor or what makes a good mentor-mentee relationship?
Sure. So for me, I think a time aspect is important. And I think that goes along with time is a genuine interest from a mentor's perspective, because I've been mainly a mentee, not a mentor yet. And I think that genuine respect and interest towards my program of research, I think has been extremely important to me, knowing that this person not just cares, but if they care and they don't know the answer, then they will help me find a person to help me get the answer. And I think related to that, I've also cherished an ability of a mentor to help me with the career advancement. So I've such as introducing me to folks if I was shy, which I'm not too shy, I guess, but in certain circumstances, perhaps I was. So sort of seeing beyond what I envisioned for myself and thinking long term and introducing me to the right people sort of at the right space. I really appreciated those mentors who have been sort of have that talent of, side conversations and networking that has really benefited me.
Great, thank you. I have one follow-up question that I'll just sort of open up to the group then. And I think this might build on a little bit with what everyone expanded on in their examples. But in particular, Marilyn, you mentioned sort of an exchange with the mentor and mentee. And I think everyone else sort of alluded in it with this idea of understanding the expectations around the relationship and what we'll get from one another. So I'm wondering if you all might speak to how mentor-mentee relationships can be reciprocal.
Actually, Tanya, I think that's essential that they're reciprocal. So, and I'm not sure exactly maybe how you're defining that word reciprocal, because it's interesting. I'm at the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine. So I'm working with graduate students by and large, and I have a number of graduate students that are actually mentors for me. So, so I'm using reciprocal in that way, but also in terms of when I'm mentor and they're mentee, we absolutely need to be talking together and having our agreement, or I don't want to use the term contract, but at least our understanding of what we're each responsible for, and to stay with that timeline that Darina mentioned. So all of that is part of building the mentor-mentee relationship, and it absolutely has to go back and forth. And there may be times where you need, I mentioned the word earlier, negotiate, that something comes up and you just need to renegotiate your timeline. That's all part of that reciprocity in the relationship.
Great. Would anyone like to expand on that?
I think I'll add from the mentee perspective, most mentors are very busy. And so if we are given suggestions or recommendations or strategies, I think in order to sort of build that reciprocal relationship, you sort of have to follow through. If you made milestones that need to be met, or they've recommended you reach out to someone, when you check back in with your mentor, they're going to want to make sure that you follow through on whatever that plan was. And so just not expecting the mentor to do all of the heavy lifting. I mean, they do a significant amount of heavy lifting. I'm very grateful for the mentors I've had that have also showed up at each meeting ready to work with an agenda, wanting to get things done. And so I think, for as much as they have poured into me, I've also been able to pour into that relationship as well. And so I think that also helps with that respect and that reciprocal relationship.
That's great. Darina or Roland, would you like to add as well?
No, I think my two colleagues have covered that.
Okay, great. Darina?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I have anything to add that's not going to repeat.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Once again, I would like to say thank you to the panelists for joining us today. Let's transition here to think about the boundaries in the relationship. Obviously, as time goes on, the nature of the relationship may evolve and change. And so the question is, does a mentor have to be a friend? And as you think about your response, would you give any different consideration if that mentor is an employer? So who would like to start with this question?
Yeah, I'll start. I don't think that a mentor has to be a friend. No, it doesn't have to be a friend at all. Because but I do think that the person that you're calling your mentor has to have those qualities and attributes that have been stated earlier, but necessarily have to be friend. No. But I do know some long-term relationships evolve over time, and then you become friends and become more than just colleagues and become friends. But it doesn't have to. No.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Dr. Gallucci, do you have any thoughts?
Sure, I do. Actually, my partner is a a mentor for me I mean, we're together 32 years and has always been a mentor. So here you have clearly a relationship that is much more than mentor and mentee. So that's possible, right? But where you start, I think, is at the mentor-mentee relationship level. Because there's usually something, and especially if you're in a professional environment or work environment, this is for a professional mentor, there's many different kinds, you're establishing that relationship first. And then it can certainly morph into whatever, as you gain that trust, that understanding, you've established that mutual respect, you've really connected from the professional level, maybe into the heart-to-heart level. So I think that morphing can happen. To expect your mentor to be your friend or turn out to be your partner, I think is something totally aside from the typical mentor-mentee relationship.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. And in both of your responses, again, acknowledging how these relationships evolve over time. From the ESPO early career perspective, Dr. Bonds-Johnson, what are your thoughts?
I agree with what's been said. I don't think a mentor has to be a friend. I have been fortunate enough in my career to have mentors that I do consider dear colleagues and dear friends, but I don't think that's a requirement. I was also in a situation where an employer, so I was their research assistant, became a mentor. And I will say that situation was actually probably more challenging for me than a typical mentor-mentee relationship, because we had already established this working relationship. And then when it came to receiving mentorship from them, I didn't feel like I had the freedoms that I would have had in a different relationship to be able to share some of my concerns. And so I had to go to other mentors to see, how do I discuss difficult conversations? Like if I feel like I'm working too much and it's interfering with what I'm doing as far as research wise. And so I think in that relationship for me as a mentee was harder to navigate than some of my other typical mentor-mentee relationships.
Right, and so acknowledging that when the mentor is an employer, navigating that relationship may look differently. Dr. Petrovsky, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I think it wasn't until my pre-doctoral program that I had sort of a mentor established, advisor who then grew into a mentor. And I have always struggled because I felt like my connection to my mentor in terms of sort of friendly conversations about stuff other than, my dissertation, were not as, I wouldn't say we're not as good, but we're not as like common as perhaps some of my colleagues. And at that point, this was early on in my program, I really felt like I was like deficient or something. I felt like I was doing something wrong, because to me, a mentor I did think of them as developing those sort of friendship qualities, but I think it sounds like the consensus is obviously they don't need to be your friend to be a mentor, but I didn't know that until much later in my career. And so, but after having left and moved on to different folks and maybe having had better or different, more sort of friendly conversations with my later mentors, now looking back, I think that it was just fine. The relationship was fine and it obviously worked. I graduated and moved on. And now I have sort of like a better or friendship with that person as opposed to when I was a pre-doctoral student. So I think the relationship changed over time. I think Dr. Thorpe alluded to that, to how colleagues become friends. And so, but yeah, in the beginning, I definitely was struggling with, I felt like they should be my friend. And because they weren't, I was thinking I was doing something wrong, and I don't think I was. So.
Before we move on to the next question, I just want to give any of the panelists an opportunity to offer any other comments related to this question if something came up as others were talking.
I want to acknowledge what Darina said, and the part that struck me was that there could be this discomfort in terms of really knowing what your mentor-mentee relationship is about and what it's morphing into. And, the bottom line for me is that this is about relationships, and it's about people
Right.
together. And that can always be such an interesting dance, depending on personalities, circumstances, work environment, whatever, your educational environment. So, we're providing some experiences that we have had, and yet the truth of the matter is every relationship is going to be different, just like they are in your life and in all aspects. And so I think it's important to, again, use that communication and to be patient and to see where it goes. And as Dr. Thorpe mentioned, it may be a quick type of mentor relationship, or it may be one that's really ending up being a life mentor for you.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I will take the next question, and I think we're going to move on to a specific type of mentoring relationship for the next question or so. And I'm wondering if you all might talk a little bit about your experience with virtual mentoring. Of course, that might be something that we're experiencing more often now than we used to in the past with the COVID pandemic. But what strategies have you found to work well when the mentor and the mentee are not at the same location? So how do you make sure that you're flexible but not too rigid, or you're not too flexible, not too rigid? How are you accountable? Timeliness, meeting frequency, etc. So what kind of strategies have worked well for all of you if you've been in a virtual mentoring situation?
That's an interesting question that you raised, because right now all of it is virtual. And I was just thinking, yes, I was just merely thinking, what has really changed? So I go back to when we shut down for the pandemic. What did I do? I didn't really change anything. We just changed the modality, right? And whatever the expectations that were already set, I maintained those, but I also shared with all my mentees, I reminded them, we're living in racial and social unjust. We're living in a pandemic. If we need to be flexible around deadlines and things, just let me know. I open up the lines of communication. The first time I met with them on the Zoom platform was to say that and say, look, if you can't make a deadline, just let me know. It's not the end of the world. We're gonna, just like we're gonna get through this pandemic, the mentoring relationship probably come out stronger, but just more and more let me know, and let's just keep open lines of communication. But as far as, I never did any virtual mentoring before before COVID, and then all of us got thrown into it. We didn't have a choice but to do it. And for me, I didn't. The only thing I did was to assure the mentees that, hey, if there's some deadline issues, or if we can't make any deadlines, let me know. And in fact, the overwhelming majority of them, we went in and we decided to actually relax some of the deadlines given, and it came from me. I was like, look, this is something different and new, stressful, and on a number of different fronts. So let's just look at our timeline and let's just agree that we're going to push some of these things out. And so that we already have enough stress on us, now. So that's what I did. I didn't really, there wasn't anything major happening for me.
Okay, great. How about the rest of you? Any other experiences with this so far?
Sure.
Go ahead, Darina.
Sure. So I have worked with, so I'm on the East Coast, and I've had a mentor on the West Coast at UCSF for a while now. So before the pandemic started. So I think the things that made that relationship work, and to sort of the time that it passed, I definitely set goals and found and created projects around our common interests. So for example, if there was a secondary data, paper we were going to work on, I made sure I worked with that mentor. I also found myself, I had to reach out a lot more to her than her to me, because obviously I wanted to, sort of gain wisdom from that person, and that seemed to work out well. And I think even though it was mostly virtual, we still would meet at GSA in person. And I felt like that would definitely fuel our relationship, our friendship over time. That, you know, it was still helpful to see each other in person and know what each other wants and eats for lunch and sort of one's habits and kind of little quirks. And I think that has really helped us to sustain that ongoing. And just like a relationship would, there are times where we would meet more frequently, and there were times where we wouldn't talk to each other for months. And I think that was okay for both of us. That was the clear expectation. We followed up through that.
Thank you. I'm hearing a little bit of consistency there around flexibility in a distance or a virtual model between those two responses. Marilyn or Khaleesha, would you like to add?
Go ahead, Khaleesha.
I don't really have anything to add. I too had a situation where my dissertation chair left the school I was at. I was on the West Coast. She moved to the East Coast. And so she will will be a lifelong mentor. And so we just continue what we were doing, very similar to what everyone else has stated. I don't think, as Roland mentioned, just because the virtual from in-person changes, kind of the same standards, respects, strategies, that still continues even if it's in on a virtual platform.
So I have a message for our audience, and that is, so I mentioned I'm at a medical school. I have 176 different medical students. There's 15 right now that I'm working on research projects with. I have not met them face to face yet. I mean, we've been on Zoom, so they're like a 1 inch or a 2 inch square. Sometimes they have masks on, even in Zoom meetings, depending on where they are. I have not seen them in a whole person. I have not been able to hug them. I'm Italian. I like to hug people. And this feels really strange to me. Now, what I'm concerned about is that when the second year of medical school starts, and hopefully we can do more face-to-face, that I am not going to recognize these students that I really got quite intimate with in terms of a working relationship. And so for those of you in the audience today, when you get back onto your campuses, if you're not already, or you haven't met with your mentor face-to-face, please go up to them, say your name, mention the project or whatever it is that you have worked with or that you appreciate from the person who has mentored you, just to kind of ground. I'm really concerned that I'm not going to recognize these students that I feel like I know on at least a virtual platform, but I don't even know if they're tall or short. I mean, I don't know any of that. And for me, sizing up, you know, the whole person is really part of the establishment of the relationship. And that part has been missed drastically by me.
Thank you. I think we all probably can relate to that, right? And this crazy Zoom and virtual environment, and missing even the ability to drop into the office, you know, your mentor's office when you're walking up and down the hall just for a quick conversation. So there are some of those things that we would do naturally in person that we don't have quite the same opportunity to do. So thank you for that perspective. Tiffany, do you want to do the next question?
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to acknowledge meeting participants who are dropping questions in the chat. We do see them, and we will certainly incorporate them as we move along. So thank you, and please continue to submit your questions. The next question relates to making that initial connection with a mentor. I recall my first year in my faculty position, wanting to work with someone who was at a nearby university, and I did the cold email, right? The cold call, the cold email, and it must have taken me 2 to 3 hours to write what resulted in just a couple of sentences. But I wanted to say the right thing, but I also wanted to be very succinct. So it could be pretty intimidating. So what is the approach to making that initial connection or reaching out, being a mentee, reaching out to someone who you would like to mentor you? What are your recommendations, or what are your thoughts about that?
I have 2 very specific pearls, I hope. And when I present, I often say this: the most powerful 3-letter word in the English language is, anybody want to take a guess? It's not yes, it's not sex, it's not age, is what?
Ask.
Yes, the most powerful, you get a gold star, the most powerful 3-letter word in the English language is ask. And the reason for that is because as soon as we're born, we are asked a ton of questions. Think about little kids in your family. Can you say mommy? Can you say daddy? Can you do this? Can you? They're all closed-ended questions. And what we're doing is we're actually programming children to answer. And so you've carried that through your life. So asking is the most powerful 3-letter word in the English language, and be sure to do that with a mentor. You'll be hopefully pleasantly surprised. The second thing I want to mention is that when you do ask, if you're doing it in person, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Morabian's communication pie chart. Only 7% is communicated through words, 38% through voice tone, 55% through body language. That makes 93% of how we convey communication through voice tone and body language. So take a deep breath, be centered. And then when you ask, at least you'll be kind of leading with that excitement, that intention, that desire to really work with this person. They'll be able to read that just in your voice tone and body language. And of course, if it's somebody that, you've read all their articles and you've seen them on TV or whatever it might be, that you might be quaking in your boots a little bit, but trust that your heart will come forward and that message will be conveyed through your voice tone and body language. And even if you stumble your words, it'll be okay because your intent will come across.
That's really great. I think we'll all be looking up that framework after this webinar. Thank you for offering it. Dr. Bonds-Johnson, I saw you shaking your head and nodding as Dr. Gallucci was speaking. Are you thinking of something in particular you would like to offer?
Oh, I am that scholar that completely fangirls when I see people. Yeah, I know. I went up to somebody and I was like, oh my goodness, you don't understand. Like my dissertation was built on your work. And they were like, I'm really not this important. But to the scholar, you are this important. Like I wouldn't have had a dissertation without your work. So I am extremely nervous all the time, especially when I'm talking about myself. It's just who I am. I've just come to accept that's who I am. My cadence picks up. I don't know if you can hear it now, but it's a lot faster than it typically is when I'm just talking to people. And that is, I've just owned it. That's who I am. But I do get really excited and passionate when I meet people, especially those people that I feel like were, the giants whose shoulders that I'm standing on when it comes to my work. So face-to-face interactions are great. I also like to have mentors connect me with other mentors or just allow me to name drop their name in an email. Sometimes that's been really helpful to say, I'm working with so-and-so, they told me to connect with you. Sometimes that, sort of takes the edge off when you're wanting to establish a new mentor-mentee relationship with someone. But again, I love everything that was said and just letting our hearts show and asking. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Thorpe?
Yeah, I don't think I've been in a scenario where I've been a mentee and asked a mentor or a potential mentor, and anyone said no. I think what in our line of business, people understand how important many people understand how important mentorship is and the mentee mentor relationship is. So I've done just like what Khaleesha just said. I certainly have sent a note ahead of time to whomever the person is, say, hey, I got a student that's going to be reaching out to you about such and such. Give them a heads up. I've introduced people at GSA to people so on a number of different occasions. So I'm happy to do that. People did it for me. I'm just paying it forward, doing what was did to me in a positive manner. So I think that it's very rewarding. It's a rewarding situation. The funny thing about it, after you do it once, Marilyn, and they say, yeah, you'll be like, oh, okay, I'm good. So I'm not as jittery tonight, right? I'm not as jittery the next time. I may still be jittery, but not as jittery. I don't know that you get really comfortable with it all the way through, but you do have some experience with it.
And as you're all talking, you know, we're definitely describing some of an in-person scenario of how to make an introduction, but I'm reminded of what we were just speaking about now that we're in that virtual space. How would that look, and wanting to be connected to someone. I'll turn it over to Dr. Petrovsky. Would you like to offer any thoughts?
Sure. Sure. I have students, who ask me, if I'm nervous or how do I do this in person? And so one of my suggestions was to them, come up, and if it's an in-person, tell them who you are. So at least they remember your name, at least remember what you look like, your matter, whatever, something about you, and then follow up with an email. But I do tend to keep those emails very short. I think they've gotten much shorter over life, and I'm sure they'll continue to get shorter as I progress in my career. But mainly it's maybe to summarize what others have said is, you want to start out that email with a very quick introduction of who you are. And even though there's a signature, you might still include some of those personal details, such as, so-and-so has recommended I reach out to you, or I am, I was an RA of a very famous PI that you're friends with. And that helps you situate you not just as a student, a postdoc, as early faculty, but as a person with connections, with expertise, with experiences. And then, sometimes I would include a sentence of sort of describing their accolades. You want to be genuine. You don't want to say, well, I have read all your papers and you're so amazing, above all stars. Be realistic, and maybe point out some things that relate to your own program of research or your own work that you see a connection with. And finally, like Marilyn said, the ask is very important. So I usually have one sentence before, with regards, respectfully, best wishes, bolded and underlined. Can you tell me? And I used to feel like that was so abrasive to do, that I would ask of a senior person for a deadline. But now, being on the other end and transitioning from a postdoc to a faculty position, I long for that sentence, because then you know what the ask is, when it's due, and how can what should be my to-do list, what should go on my to-do list to help this person and help them. So I would say, like, those are the three main points. I think all of us, you probably did too when you wrote that email. But it should be very specific and sort of outlined, and that really helps.
Right.
Darina, I think what you just said was just so well stated. And when I have students who are interested in reaching out to other mentors, and they might run that email by me prior to that outreach, I think one of the issues is that they just ramble on way too long, and really your first sentence should set up what this email is about. I'm also going to add that I think it's a good idea to add your CV, especially if you're looking at some kind of either research relationship or, something like that. Then, but I really liked what you had to say. So thank you for that.
Well, and we had a question come in on the chat that's related. And I thought maybe if one of you would like to address this, and because it relates to what you just said, Marilyn, and that's what kinds of mentorships should an early career researcher be looking to establish? Because, there's lots of people that we might engage with out there, even through GSA, but how would you go about, what do you need to be focusing on, do you think, in the early career?
I would like to defer to Khaleesha on this, because you actually addressed this when you were talking about your outreach. So let's see if you pick up on my vague referral.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I think personally, I have needed a mentor in my content area, of course. I mean, that makes sense. You want someone that sort of knows the field, knows some of the key questions and where the field is going that you're interested in. Because I also work as a clinician, I have had clinical mentors that have guided me as a psych nurse practitioner and in my role when it comes to seeing patients, as I still am credentialed to see patients now. And then sort of with leadership, be it through GSA's leadership or leadership, considering I'm in the School of Nursing and maybe wanting to look at some leadership roles there. So I do have mentors that sort of guide my career along leadership. And not to say that one mentor can't touch multiple areas, because I do have some mentors presently that I go to for multiple things. I'm actually entering the job market and just recently had a couple of faculty interviews. And so I'm touching every key mentor I have when it comes to trying to make that decision. So I think personally, like I said, content, leadership, clinical, and then sometimes it's just good to have what has been called like a cheerleader, just a mentor that may have nothing to do with your work, but when your internal critic is running high and imposter syndrome is real, to just have someone that is further along that can say, yes, this is completely normal, but you'll be okay. And so those are kind of my main mentors that I have in my own life.
I was going to add to that. Absolutely, I agree with Khaleesha. I would add that I think a peer mentor have been amazing. And of course, seeing that Khaleesha is on the panel, we do work a lot together, and we have written grants together, and I see our friendship move along. I also do seek out intentionally somebody who is 1 or 2 years ahead of me. And given that the period from being a student to a postdoc to early faculty is a lot of transitions in a shorter amount of time, I think, less than 10 years. Because of those transitions are so major and can be disruptive, I do seek out somebody just a couple years ahead of me and ask them, hey, you still remember what it was like in my position? Can you help me? How do I get to your sort of position or to your state or to your whatever? And that has really been helpful. So I just wanted to add those things. And actually, no, one last thing. When I entered the job market, I did seek out mentors that I thought I would be able to work well together. So I was also strategic in terms of, geographically where they were, but now that we're all virtual and I think cross university sort of boundaries and walls have been dropped in some cases, I don't think that is as important as having a content mentor methodology or the areas that Khaleesha touched upon.
I know this is going to sound really strange, so everybody bear with me, but there's nothing that says that your mentor, one of your mentors, has to be alive. And I mean that in that there are some amazing people who have come before us that have died. Eleanor Roosevelt happens to be a mentor for me. And although I can't tell her that personally, her writings, some of her quotes have really helped me take that step forward when I felt most hesitant, the do the thing you fear kind of thing. And so I definitely agree with everything Khaleesha and Darina has stated. And then just want to broaden the perspective a bit and say, they could have died already, but they're still quite powerful and can still be powerful in your life and guiding you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think we can shift gears again just a little bit. And I think this actually comes full circle with some of the very early responses that you all provided in terms of negotiation, transparency, respect, and setting up expectations. But wondering if you could each say a bit about how you might communicate dissatisfaction or issues in a mentoring relationship and or even end a mentoring relationship.
Yeah, I'll start. From the approach that I take is I develop a relationship with my mentees that we should be able to talk about anything at any time, and we're transparent. So if we have deadlines and they're not being met, I think that's kind of obvious. So that gives you the gateway to say, hey, I noticed that, I noticed that, and I typically use the we instead of you. I noticed that we didn't make our goals because we both agreed to this. So it's a shared in the in that respect. And we decision making and sharing. So we would take the shared ownership. So I noticed we didn't make our goals. Do you have any rationale as to why you think we didn't make meet these goals, or whatever the goal may be, we didn't make it. And then we have a conversation around it. For me, the goal is not to in my mentoring relationships, my goal is to make sure that we all can remain very comfortable and comfortable with being able to share our concerns, um, with one another without it getting to be to the point where, oh, I don't want to meet with Roland. He gets on my nerves, before it gets to that. I think you want to have a relationship, or at least I work hard to have a relationship with my mentees where it's open and it's honest and it's transparency. Because if it's not, then that's when I think, at least from my perspective, the real trouble starts. So, and we use our timelines. I think what Marilyn mentioned earlier on, we use those to help guide a lot of the conversation. And many of the times I ask that when we have meetings, we do come with an agenda so we can guide the conversation. Otherwise, for me, if I don't have an agenda, then I'm talking about everything except probably what really needs to be talked about. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's the best meetings also.
Sure. I think in terms of my experience, and I'm coming this from, once again, when I was very junior in my doctoral study, so I'm not sure if my approach was the best, but I definitely learned from it. I did feel like my mentor in my pre-doctoral study, there was something that wasn't working. I mentioned, I sort of saw them as a friend, but something wasn't quite. So what I ended up doing was, I think what I should have done is probably followed Roland's advice, having maybe pushed to have a little more of that open communication, but maybe I wasn't comfortable doing that, or something in me, maybe I didn't know how to do it correctly, but I also found that having yourself supportive peers really helped me get through some of that. And some of it is not necessarily to help me find the solution, but just to get me to talking about it. And when you talk about it, sometimes solution comes to you. And also in a situation where there wasn't really a choice for me to, work with somebody else, because content wise and knowledge wise, that person was the best person for me to work with. I ended up bringing in somebody else, another sort of who became later a mentor to me from a different school within the university, who helped us sort of get through some of the bumps along the road. And having that third person not just help me, get additional knowledge in a different area, but also sort of mend and get through that relationship successfully. And I really accredited, my success through the program by bringing in an additional person to help me navigate those relationships.
That seems like some really great advice to enlist the help of someone from outside the relationship, maybe when needed, to strategize for handling difficult situations. Khaleesha or Marilyn, would you like to add?
Go ahead, Khaleesha, I'll finish up.
I was going to say I had a similar situation where I had to bring someone else in. I was in my pre-doc. I had been offered the postdoc. And again, I mentioned that I was in this sort of working relationship with a mentor who I was also her research assistant before. And it just felt like, because she couldn't find a replacement for her research assistant, that being me, that there was some stalling on allowing me to finish my dissertation on time. And so it was a difficult situation. I didn't feel like the power was in my hands. And then it's like, how do I have this conversation where it seems like you need me as a research assistant, but I need to graduate to move on to this next chapter. And so I was able to bring in someone else to have the difficult conversation to discuss, well, maybe I need to step back in my role as research assistant if it doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to graduate on time, because this is why I came to the PhD program. We already have this postdoc lined up. It's not an option for me to start the postdoc late. And so just recognize that difficult conversations happen. Anytime we're dealing with people, we all have lots of competing agendas and ideas, but I think Roland makes a good point that if you can come respectfully and have this open conversation, that there can be resolve. And I did graduate on time. I did start my postdoc on time, and she did find a new research assistant. So it all worked out.
And with that word respect, and Khaleesha, I love following you because you just really lay things out so nicely, and also following on on Roland, that word respect, and let's not forget self-respect. And so Khaleesha actually exhibited a high level of self-respect by stating her boundaries, what she knew to be true for herself and what she needed to accomplish. And you need to embrace yourself. I mean, think about, all of us are in the field of aging, and how often we hear that older adults have trouble asking for help. You know, we're all human. I don't care what age we are. And that asking for help or carefronting someone that we're working with instead of confronting is just so important. I want to add one thing that we talked about, you know, mentorship is relationship, and then we all know not all relationships are successful, but setting those boundaries to begin with. Whenever a student walks into my office or on a Zoom, and I'm going to work with them, I say to them right up front, if you bring a problem, you also need to bring a solution. It doesn't have to be the solution, just a solution, because then we're causing an opportunity for reframing and getting people to think about possibilities instead of just problems and closed doors. So that is essential in mentorship relationships in my life. And if a student is only going to bring problems, then I'm going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to be very straightforward and say, what's the solution, or what's your mantra to get through this? And I think that reframing is really important. And as a mentor, I feel that I need to share that with the students I work with, the people I work with.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we are getting close to the end of our time today because we were having a great conversation. And I want to acknowledge that we've had a lot of questions that have come in that maybe we need to figure out a way to extend this conversation. Questions around international mentee-mentor relationships, whether or tips for helping to progress these relationships over time and how they evolve, either to continue to grow or to dissolve, and just some tips for how to manage some of those things. So I think we have lots of opportunities to continue this conversation. And so to wrap us up today, I'd like to as we bring the session to a close, to ask each of our panelists to share a pearl of wisdom about mentoring with us. We asked them to prepare a pearl to close with, and I think we'll start with Dr. Bonds-Johnson.
Of course. Okay. That's what you get when your name is at the beginning of the alphabet. So no, but I thank you for this opportunity.
That is why
I think my pearl of wisdom is just really important. It's important as a mentee to know who you are as a mentee, because this knowledge influences your mentoring experience. So personally, I can say I have a really strong internal critic that is constantly telling me I'm not enough. And so I needed mentors who wouldn't be super critical because I'm already very critical of myself. And so that has really just been a guide for me throughout this journey.
Thank you. And Dr. Petrovsky.
Sure. I like that point, Khaleesha. I think over time I also realized sort of what are my weaknesses and how can mentors with certain styles help me, overcome those weaknesses. My pearls of wisdom was, I wrote that surround yourself by supportive peers to get you through the program and potential disagreements with your mentor, which I mentioned earlier. And my last one is related, I think, to Khaleesha, is always remember your why in staying true to your values and who you are in the process.
Dr. Galucci, your pearl?
Okay. Yep, I'm gonna follow my good friend now, Khaleesha, in terms of what she started with. Everyone should have at least 5 mentors. And it could be professional, personal, doesn't matter, peer, but have at least 5 mentors and have more than that. It's so important to have that supportive group around you, and everybody has something to offer and advance your growth professionally and personally.
Thank you. And Dr. Thorpe, do you have a pearl that you can share with us today?
Sure. The one that resonates with, I have a couple of them, but the one that resonates with me at this moment of time is progress, not perfection. So oftentimes, you know, as you're coming through this, it's coming through and making these transitions, you feel like the doctoral, so you feel like you have to have everything right. There's very little room to get wrong. And then when you get to postdoc, you relax a little bit, but you still feel that you got to show the next level. And there's so much stress put upon people to be perfect. And part of this is it's not about being perfect. When in my lab and the people that I work with, it's not about being perfect. It's just let's make progress. Science is incremental. Mentorship is incremental. Let's just make progress one step at a time. Because I tell people all the time, let's move from do progress, not perfection, so we can find and we can sit at the corner of happiness and success.
Nice. Thank you so much. And please join me in thanking all of our panelists today for generously sharing their time, mentoring experience, and their perspectives with us today. They all were so graciously immediately said yes when I asked them to participate. And we've had a great group with a lot of expertise and experiences to share. I also want to thank our moderators who were excellent today. Tanya and Tiffany, appreciate it a lot. And I also would like to thank our work group members who planned this first career conversation. And thanks to all the participants for the great questions that have come in. This question about international mentors and a lot of the good thoughts about evolution of mentorship over time. I'm taking these notes, and maybe we'll be able to have a round two to further delve into these topics that you're bringing up. So thank you as well to the participants for your questions and your comments. We are going to send out a brief survey following the event for you to provide us some feedback and help us to plan the future career conversations, or tell us it's not working. But I would love to hear your feedback. And again, I hope you all have a great afternoon. I will give you looks like 2 minutes to get ready, or 3 minutes to get ready for your 4 o'clock. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you.